Tuesday, 2022. We are absent several members this evening. So if I could do this wholesale and just see all of our alternates that are present, which are all of our alternates, that would be great. I don't think I need to do anything formal on that, Mary Ellen. No. And you all are probably going to be seated for the regular meeting at 7 o'clock as well. So
you can't leave.
Yeah. But with that, I guess we'll I'll kick it over to the chairman of our zoning regulations subcommittee, Peter Santiago. And Peter, you can introduce Glenn and talk about what's going on.
Sure. So thank you first for coming. And as we had said, my committee, which is Joe and Caleb, have been looking to look at our regulations for a while, look and feel and that kind of thing. Had some stops and starts over the years. And then Mary Ellen was good enough to look at her budget closely, and we had some money and said, well, what can we do for a professional? Because I think, Caleb, you made the very eloquent point of, we could be meeting once a month for years and never approach what we could do in a few months by a professional. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something to that regard. And I said, that's true. And so what we can do, what we have Glenn for, is to look at how our regulations look and feel, that kind of thing, look for some more visual things, maybe some inconsistencies that it said. We'll have a discussion around all that. And so what Glenn suggested for this evening was for all of us to kind of give him our thoughts and some feedback, certainly look and feel wise, because as we all know, the online version of our regulations are merely pictures of the printed one. It's not really, for lack of a better word, online. It's just PDFs that happen to be on a computer. Those are two different things, as we know. And so if we have some feedback this evening, and I believe, Glenn, you intended this to be more of a working meeting, to kind of solicit some feedback and direction around things, that's what he's looking for. And then after that, my committee will kind of be I think either Joe or Caleb, you came up to want to give you credit for, power user, if you will, and direct activity after that. And we kind of will speak for you, as we do with all kinds of subcommittees that we have. So I think that's pretty much what we had. So Glenn, is that to what you kind of thought too? And I should say, one of the things that we did too, before we got to this point, was kind of look at some other towns as well and see what some other towns have done. And other towns have gone through this process. Yes. Before. And so we were kind of looking to benchmark other places. I know we looked at Canton, we looked at Bristol, we looked at a lot of other ones, certainly when Rob was here and now Mary Ellen, to kind of get this. I don't think the intent at this point is to change any regulations unless we see things that are wrong or we're getting in trouble for. So the intent is not, I don't particularly like this regulation, we should change it. That's not the intent, at least at this stage. It's more of an initial type look at it. So if that's consistent with your understanding.
It is. I think we've working with Mary Ellen, as you indicated, she was able to find some money in the budget. So our goal here is sort of twofold in two phases. The first phase is to go through, take a look at the regulations, the organization, the configuration of the regulations, and see how we can make it more user-friendly, not for the professionals that are in the room, who use the regulations daily and perhaps know them perhaps better than the commission may. But the issue would be, if somebody wants a simple question, can I add a deck? Can I do this? A dog house, a solar collector? What's the scenario?
Right.
And the goal here is to make that happen in the regulations.
Right.
So I think there's a couple of things that are going to go on here. One of which is, as you point out, is to move pieces around in the regulations to add user-friendly features, which will be a new numbering system, because we can't keep the old numbering system. People are going to get horribly confused.
Yeah.
And provide click links and cross links between terms in the regulations so that people can find what they're looking for and be able to get to it quickly. So, for example, the situation we found in the regulations is what we kind of call skippity-doo-dah. And what we have in the regulations right now is a situation where one zone identifies some uses that are permitted, then the next zone says, well, those uses plus these, and then you find yourself in the fourth or fifth zone, and you got to go back 4 to 5 zones to figure out. And so we're going to try to address that so that most people who are not power users or regular users of the regulations get confused, throw their hands up, get frustrated, and may voice that to the commission or to staff and others. And we can make that simple.
Yeah. And Glenn, I think one of the other things, and you kind of touched on it, and we had started this, and I think I had given it to Mary Ellen, and for ease of use and also for education purposes for the public, we had started, and it was really a table, and it could be a table, it could be what visual, whatever it was. And that is, what is the process per thing? For example, and I think what we had was a very simple chart that had public hearing, application, site plan. I'm oversimplifying, but you kind of get it, right?
Yep.
All right, so if I have a special permit application, I get all 3. Check, check, check. If I have just a straight subdivision, well, there legally is no public hearing. There's simply a application site plan, because we all get into situations where people say, well, why did you have a public hearing? Well, because it's an as of right and there isn't a public hearing for that. Or we just had something where we had a public hearing and we had to explain the process to people to say, no, there's 2 more bites at this apple. There's the application, there's a site plan, or whatever. And so by having, say, a 1-page, here's the process look, it would help new commissioners, certainly, as well as the public to understand what is the process that we're talking about. And so I think we had started that and given that. And so I think in the spirit of what am I supposed to be doing in education, it's not just that. So if we could have that sort of thing in a visual set, I think that would go a long way too.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I'd like to talk to the commission about here this evening. So I'm here for a couple of things. First of which is that if you, through your work on the commission, have experienced circumstances or situations where something in the regulations has frustrated you in some way, shape, or form, this is a great time to download that and share that so that we can take a look at that as part of the regulations. Part of my work product back to the committee and eventually back to the commission is going to be sort of sidebar notes that as I go through the regulations and reorganize things, I'm going to start asking questions. Why are we doing it this way? Or this doesn't appear to comply with law. And to try to set the table, if you will, for additional discussions down the road.
Right.
Now, I did prepare, and perhaps you've had an opportunity to see a summary of our scope of work, and it's pretty straightforward. I think our goal here is for simplicity and ease of use. And we're going to be able to add in some graphic illustrations to help people visualize and understand things. Some of the tricky issues or the things that staff gets regular calls on, picture's worth 1,000 words. And if people know that they can find what they need in the regulations, it can start to address some of those things. Click links and other things in the regulations, as I indicated earlier. I've been doing scoping meetings with town staff and reaching out to both primary staff. These are the people that provide staff reports on a regular basis to the commission. Other municipal departments that peripherally get involved in land use and just saying, look, if you have any issues, please let me know. And I'm also scheduled a meeting with power users, which are architects, engineers, landscape architects, people who use the regulations on a regular basis to try to get input and feedback from them as to the issues that they see in the regulations. They may know, for example, that Cheshire does this, Wolcott does that, and Southington does this. And they may be able to say to us, well, hang on a second here. You know, Wolcott's got a really great way for doing this. Why don't you look at that? And so we can take advantage of their expertise without. There may be applications pending, but that's not why I'm talking to them, to find ways that we can do things better. And my job, I think, is to listen to that. Sometimes, like the emperor's new clothes, you find the best information sometimes in the most surprising ways, and they may have that information. So what will then come back to you is a reorganized set of regulations. I'm probably going to group some related definitions together. The concept of principal and accessory is pretty important in zoning. but P and A are not together in the alphabet, so people read accessory before principal and they don't understand how they work. And once you understand that, the light bulb goes off for people and it calms the waters. And other types of things related to that. I mean, daycare. There's 3 different levels of daycare: daycare home, family, daycare home, daycare center. And if they're sorted by group, family, and daycare center, you don't understand the distinctions. If you put them together, you say, all right, I fall in one of these 3 buckets, and it makes it easy for people. So those types of things. Again, addition of graphics. On this memo for the commission, on page 2, item number 4, is an opportunity for the commission to give me a green light today on some things that may be somewhat straightforward. Perhaps not. Your procedure section right now don't look like they really kind of track exactly some of the changes in the statutes. I can replace your procedure section with a new procedure section that tracks the requirements in the statute, comes with a flow chart that somebody can see. So
I like flowcharts.
flow charts can be,
I like pictures.
yeah, picture's worth 1,000 words. And again, as you are well aware, the timing of an application, sometimes the application comes in, the public hearing, the commission acts the same night. Other times, the hearing wait 65 days, have the hearing and the decision. People don't understand that, but when you see the picture, you start to get a handle, or the referrals that go to wetlands and others. So those flow charts are already prepared in the fact that they comply with state law. And I think at some point in time, the committee should give a green light, or commission here tonight, and say, yeah, we'd like to see what those procedures look like before we replace.
Yeah, I think just from a tactical basis, things like this would probably want to go through committee, and then we'll take a look and then procedurally go up to the
Yep.
thing. Because I think, not to talk for Caleb and Joe, but I think that's kind of what we had envisioned. No,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yep. So that's on the procedure section. I'll go ahead and
Yeah.
make that happen.
Yeah.
I think definition changes, I'm going to highlight some issues that I've seen sort of so far as being situations where regulations appear in a definition. And that's kind of a challenging thing. And so I'm going to point those out, but I'm not, again, going to change those without some directive from the committee to do so.
Good.
Thanks.
Could you also, on the spirit of definition, as we have looks at other towns, I'm curious if our definition for things is consistent with what other towns call things. I'll use one that I always thought we kind of got to look at, and that's the word family. I think the word family right now is a bit dated in what we have. And so I'm kind of curious of what other towns may have. So in your thing, if you see a definition that is, you call this, other places call it that, I'd be interested.
Yep.
I think we'd be, I shouldn't say I think we'd be interested in.
And I think
seeing
that it's very perceptive, because that's a very fluid area right now of the law.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's the type of thing that in the first draft, what is likely to come back is, let's talk about this, or let's
Correct.
look at this.
Correct.
And then that can lead us to additional discussion in terms of what the evolution is in the definition of family.
Right. Because we can't change any regulation without a public hearing.
Correct.
So we can't change anything without a public hearing and going through it and all that.
Yes.
Look and feel is something other than changing things. So we have to have a public hearing around
The
changing
commission
stuff. So-
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just a question about procedure then. Is, could we move things around in the code as long as we don't change any words without a public hearing?
Here's what I envisioned since Peter and I initially talked about this, is that it's all going out, all this is going out to the subcommittee. Let the subcommittee sort of deal with the details. After the subcommittee has worked with Planometrics and staff or whoever is working with them on this, it's going to come back as sort of a wholesale revision of our zoning regs along these lines, right? They shouldn't be anything significant. They really should be more of a clarifying.
Organizational.
right, nature. So I want to sort of bring it all back rather than bring it back as 50 different pieces, let's say. Let's bring it all back as one piece. And then the commission will hold a public hearing on that.
Fair.
And then we'll take action based on whatever the feelings are on these things, so.
And if we have some separate things that would change a regulation, that would be a whole separate process. You would alert us to those things, and then we would go through a separate thing on that if we
What
thought.
will come back to you is sort of a red line copy,
Right,
all right? There's any
exactly,
changes.
right.
So for example, right now, one of the things I've been playing around with is the concept of a use table, right? Because right now, when we talk about a single-family dwelling, it's permitted essentially in all of the districts, but you only figure that out by putting your fingers in between the pages and flipping around.
Yeah,
So a table could be worth 1,000 words. So I think that that is a substantive but non-technical change. So what will come back to you is potentially 2 documents, one of which will be with a sidebar and red line observations for you to review, consider, discuss, and we may set priorities depending on, budget availability, et cetera. I've talked with Jim, for example, about the concept of LID and drainage and how we can incorporate that into the regulations in a comprehensive but user-friendly way.
Great.
To make it clear that Southington wants to move in this direction.
Right.
If that change is going to happen, that's not going to happen in phase 1.
Correct.
But we can set the stage for it
Beautiful.
and show what that could be.
Great.
So one document will come back with the sidebar margin markings, and the other one will come back to you clean, which is going to be the text
Gotcha.
reorganized and possibly presented in table format in a new way.
Gotcha.
But anything substantive, I do not want to create any problems or challenges for the
Gotcha.
commission. I want to bring you along so you understand every change along the way, because this is your set of regulations.
Well,
Make
and let's be clear, I mean, the project is called reorganizing and updating. It's not called modifying. So we're not looking to modify
Great.
our zoning regs. What we're looking to do is to clean them up, make them more user-friendly, make them easier to understand, maybe make them a little bit more transparent in light of that. When it does come back, the way that it's worked in the past, and I plan on working it this way at that point, is that I'll defer to the subcommittee to make a presentation. I assume Glenn will be here or somebody from Planmetrics will be here to assist the subcommittee, but that's going to fall on the subcommittee to present it to the members of the commission. Right? That's the way we've always done changes in the past that have been initiated by commission members.
Yeah, that's fine.
So then the changes that in the proposal, wherever it is in front of me, so like under section 4
Yep.
of your proposal, those are some changes, I think. Does that fit into how? I mean,
Would that be the red line stuff that you identified?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reorganization, if we use red line for the reorganization, everything's going to turn red because it's being moved around, and that's not user friendly for you. So my pledge to you is that things will move around so they end up in the right place, and then any edits that occur within that will then start to be redlined in the future as the committee or the commission desires moving forward.
Caleb, were you talking about the statutory changes specifically in the
yeah, I'm just
scope document?
yeah, I'm just reading.
No,
the,
that's more of an updating, Caleb. If we're bringing this in line with what statutory changes have been since the initial regulations were drafted or whatever last time it might have been that they were actually revised to reflect statutory changes, that's an updating. That's not changing
that fits
a
in with what we
regulation.
want to do. It's not. We're not going outside of the scope of work.
Right, but things like, as you remember last year, we took up the issue of accessory dwelling units. We're not going to put accessory dwelling units in our regulations because this commission has voted per state statute and public act, whatever, one or
2129.
dash one or something, yeah, not to allow accessory dwelling units. So you're not going to make, that wholesale change is not going to happen.
Right,
But
that's-
more of a cleaning up to make sure that our regulations are in line with
That's a whole
whatever
nother animal.
the statute, right,
Changes to the
whatever
and
the
that's-
statutory requirements are, you have to do this or this type of stuff.
So I think the best way to describe my understanding is that in this generalized scope of services before you, item 3 is included, but item 4 is basically not included in terms of changes. What would happen on item 4 is that item 3 is the reorganization. We're going to move things around. We're going to have to change the numbering section of the sections. We may group related definitions together, but not change the definitions. We may add graphics to explain building height and things, but we're not going to
Right.
change your definition. We're just going to illustrate it. We're going to use click links and other things like that to make it easy to get to the next section that you need to see. Section, pardon me?
Continuous numbering would be awesome for the page numbers. Logically, really.
Yeah, staff kind of likes it the way it is, but I've worked out a deal with staff that, listen, I'm going to create one document, which is making it more efficient for our use and the click links and everything else. But for their maintenance, they may separate them out because it's easier for them to maintain. But I think the goal would be when it's published online, it's going to be a document which is searchable and usable.
Sure.
And click links within. So you kind of have to maintain one document to make that functionality.
Right.
You don't want the links to be broken.
So just to clarify, when you're looking at the regulations online,
Yep.
I think this is what you just said, and you come up to, allowable uses for an R40 or all those allowable uses that are allowed in an R20, you can click on there's going to be a link to click on the R20 and it will bring you to those type of thing. I'm not saying that's the way
one
it's going to
option,
be set
Rob.
up,
I'd
but
really like
something
to
like
get
that.
rid of the skippity doo dah because you
I know.
lose track of where you were in the regs.
Oh, God.
And a more intuitive structure,
Right.
which allows the regulations to be adapted over time as new provisions are inserted or proposed, is just a better architecture for the regulations than what we have right now. And if you really look at the structure of the regulations, it really jumps around quite a bit in terms of thoughts and concepts. I think my work on zoning regulations over the years, I've understood how people use the regulations and sometimes funny stories about how people came to a conclusion they did about whether something was permitted or not.
Yeah.
And it's partly because the architecture of the regs is not well configured. So if you can get people what they need to know quickly and simply, and they don't have to go chasing through all the other parts of the regulations, it'll be a huge step forward.
I don't know if it's of value to you, but a couple years ago, I forget, we have online on our website, and it's in Excel, God bless Karen for putting it all in Excel, was a history of all the changes.
Yep.
So that you could at least go in and say, here's the reg, when did that change?
Right.
Revision history.
Is
Yeah.
right,
We should keep that.
yeah, agree. So I don't know if that is of aid to you or
It is, but-
we could incorporate or whatever it is, but it's like, what spurred me was when you said how we got there. It's like, how did we get there? And how many times was that change in order to get to the point we are? And so I think,
So your numbering system right now, I guess I would describe as sequential, but not hierarchical. So sequential means when you adopted the redevelopment zone regulation, I think it went into section 18. And if you were going to adopt a new section right now, you'd probably put it into section 19 and then 20. And that doesn't help the hierarchy of the regulations. I think the regulations work well as having 4 main sections to them. And then we're going to create a hierarchical system. So when you adopt something new, you sort of know where it's got to go. And there's a hierarchy of where it would fit in.
okay,
And that makes it user-friendly for people going forward. So I think that's an easier way to maintain the regulations, et cetera, over time.
okay.
I think that we're going to renew, I guess perhaps is the best way to describe it, the table of amendments, because right now it's tied to the current section numbers. And we're going to keep track of how the sections have moved. But you'll notice on the pages of the zoning regulations, there are footnotes
Yep.
that tie back. And the decision we've made on a preliminary basis is to keep those footnotes. Because even though the section number may change, the footnote references to the application year and date and number.
Yeah, you gotta
And that
find it.
allows staff and others to quickly get back to that. So that makes it user-friendly. There may come a time in the future where the footnotes, have you ever seen a legal decision where the footnotes there's more footnotes on the page than the text itself?
Yeah.
We're not near there right now. So I think it's a very helpful, user-friendly feature. And our goal is to keep the footnotes, but we're going to probably end up restarting the amendment list. And the two of them together, I think will work well.
Okay. I think some of the committee members have their own either pet peeves or stuff they'd like to get off their chest or whatever. So why don't we get some, because we got about almost half hour to kind of do this. So I know, Nick, you had,
I apologize.
you're like,
Out of order.
I know you're like chomping at the bit to kind of say stuff. So that's
Usually
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, outside of the continuous numbering or just, making it so if you hit Control or Command F, you can actually find what you're looking for without like 40 results popping up and having to go through one by one to find what you're looking for. Specific things like I had update definitions as well, but also like non-conforming uses in section 11, subsection 9, and then expanding conforming uses is the next subsection. Just cleaning up things like that.
Yep.
That's mostly what I had together because I know it's very general what you're trying to streamline and
But I think your observation about nonconforming is very helpful because I think nonconforming is a very special area of the regulations where uses and historic uses are protected, but there are strict rules that apply. So they should be grouped together in a meaningful way because we can have a nonconforming use, a nonconforming structure, or a nonconforming lot. And there's different rules sort of for each of those. So if somebody's going to fall into that category, let's clearly spell out what they can and cannot do. And I think it'll calm the waters,
Yeah,
perhaps.
more coherent.
yeah, I agree. That's a good area. Anything else?
Yeah, the big one for me is what you covered already is like just the nesting of the sections and having to dig through. So I think that idea of really bubbling it up to a table and making it, real easy at a snapshot. That's the big one. And then any way we can put more visualization in there and just the user experience through the document, I think would be huge.
Yep. Thank you.
Tessa, you have anything?
No, I don't.
The visualization,
Sure,
so I got to play it
graphics,
down and up and down, sure.
That flows.
Great. Kat?
Yeah, because I thought about a decision tree. How do you determine what zone you live in, first of all? And based on what zone you live in, what can I do within that zone? I think, we kind of have it laid out by zone and then what.
So how crazy do you guys want to be on this?
Well, Kat brings up an intriguing point as far as, like, what does R40 mean? Like, what can happen here versus R20 versus R80 versus I2, I1? Like, what's that mean really? I think it's kind of what you're getting at,
Yep.
right?
Yep,
Right?
There's a table that kind of defines it and having that link.
it does, yeah.
No, but I think, okay, so I'm piecing together the comments that
So-
you've had so far, and I think what could help here is what I would call sort of a purpose statement.
Yeah.
There you go.
Beginning of the residential section, there's a fundamental difference between the R80, which are on the hillsides and have environmental constraints that don't exist in the R20, R25. So
Right.
the issue is the flatter land, closer to town, so our overall philosophy, now this would be a recommended change. So it's going to show up, if you will, sort of as a sidebar note or something, as something for us to do. But I think that, as Rob had pointed out earlier, that making that change right now would be a fundamental
Yeah.
change. So we may end up with a couple of different options, right?
Yeah.
The simplest approach and something which is more nuanced, but I don't want to get too deep into it. But I think the idea of the purpose statement, setting up the zones is important because it's not in the regs today.
Now, and to Kat's point, and I think and again, it goes back to education too. As of right versus special permit.
Yeah,
So I'm a property owner. And we all know this, but many times the public doesn't. So if I'm a property owner, I have an as of right to my property. Government cannot tell me what I could do with my property. So if I'm within regulation, I can do X. There's no public hearing. I present a site plan. We can't say no to that. Have a nice day. Versus I'm in R40 zone and I want to do something special. Well, what does what does that mean? And it goes back to what can I do and what's the process to get there? So, I'm in R40 and I want to do, I don't know, a 4-car garage. We get that a lot. Well, that's special. It's still your property, but you have to have a public hearing. You have to have, here's my application, here's my site plan. Versus, I want to put a house on an R40 lot that conforms with my regulations. There's no public hearing. I have constitutional right to go do that. As long as I present a site plan that fits, we cannot deny that if you fit it. So that it's kind of the purpose statement, and then that leads to what's the process to go do it? Like, what can I go do versus
So I'm
what's
thinking a little
special,
bit-
if you will.
a little bit
Yeah.
further down the road, in the sense that in terms of the organization of the regulations, right now your regulations read a little bit like many other zoning regulations, like a book.
Yep.
First chapter says, hey, we have the power to do this under state law, and the purposes of these regulations are as follows, and we're going to enforce these and set some basic ground rules. Then we get into definitions. You can be 40 pages back in the regulations before you get, what can I do on my property?
Yeah.
So some towns have flipped the organization of the regulations, and up front is what we might call a quick start guide, which says, look, the quick start guide says, if the regulations don't say it's permitted, you have to assume it's prohibited. You got to tell people
Okay.
that up front. I think we could have some basic information, as you indicated, that here's a click link to the zoning map, find where your property is, and take note of what the zone is, because
Yep.
that's going to now lead you to the regulations that you really need to look at.
Okay.
And so
I like that.
you feed it to people. But what happens in that scenario is that the definitions go to the back, as does the gobbledygook, regulatory gobbledygook. You know, we have the power to do this, et cetera. But if you think about users,
Yeah.
the first thing they want to know is, what does this book mean? It says right here, okay, here's the basic ground rules of how to approach these regs. There might be another page or two, as you points out, the difference between as of right versus site plan versus zoning permit versus zone change. And now, right there, the next page is purposes of the residential zones, and then there's the table of uses.
Yeah.
You can do this, you can't do that. Okay.
You good with it? So I think you're hearing it, and however, I mean, you're hearing our thoughts, and you're an expert about what's the best way to present this. So I don't think we're married to anything.
No.
We just have our thoughts about kind of what we're talking about. So how it's done is
Right.
whatever's the best way. That we'll take a look at, right?
Yeah,
We're not
so-
here to design. We're just here to express our thoughts, right? Not to put words in your mouth, but that's it, right?
No, it's nice to throw thoughts at other people and have you come and bring me something else. Like, I do this all day, so
Yeah.
it's nice to have you do it.
Can you do this one?
No,
You'll have to split the
I'm taking
fee.
a break.
You have to split the fee with Kat.
I thought I was so close.
Yeah, see what happens?
Guys, I'm going to sub this out.
Yeah, look at her.
Oh, man, I've been contracted.
See?
I know, yeah.
All
See,
right, Glenn,
That'll
take a
teach you to show up at
seat.
6 o'clock,
Yeah.
right? See what you get?
Kat, do you have anything else?
That was my main thing.
Great.
I think we all understood.
Great. No, it's perfect. Caleb.
Yeah. So while you were talking, I looked at the child daycare center piece of it, just because I don't look at it very often. But the second section, I don't think that fits with the state definition of child daycare or home daycare, where the licensing Office of Early Childhood Education has it in like institutional setting where you would have a large daycare center, or it's a home daycare.
Yep.
So I think we might want to just look at that to make sure
Yep.
that that's one of those accurate things. And then again, Peter said it before, is some of the definitions, and as I started to, pick through this, the definitions seem more that they're, especially in the subsections like accessory use or building, it's more of a directive than it is a definition. So I'm telling you, you can't rent these rooms.
Yes.
Whereas that should probably be located in a different
Somewhere in the regulations.
Yeah, in the regulations.
Does everybody understand the sort of the nuance here that we're getting to? Because I think what Caleb's bringing up is an important point. If you write your definition in a way that it's got a regulation in it, so daycare center, for example, what happens if you're running a daycare center but not that way? What is that? Is it no longer a day? Well, yeah, it's still a daycare center. It's just you're in violation, but you're in violation of a definition, which is like you start to end up in this kind of circular cyclone of stuff. And it's just much cleaner and easier. Define the terms concisely and then get a regulatory situation. So I do think that as part of our work, there are a number of situations where those things will be pulled out and a click link reference. So the use table will say daycare, there it is, special permit, click on the link to the section, there's the standards, and you're done in about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And that it's going to be very helpful for
Yeah.
people. So, yes.
Caleb, do you have any other?
No, I mean, those are, I think that collectively we're heading in the right direction. And, those are just the things that we picked out. And as you go through more, you find more. And
Yeah, and I think as I go through it in more detail, right now I've started to think about the organizational aspects to it, but I've learned so much from staff, and I expect to learn more from the power users and from the commission here tonight. I'm now able to go into the regulations and balance all of these things, thinking about how this is all going to come together.
One of the ones, just to go on Caleb's line, that we kind of talked about at subcommittee line, and this would be a change, and so, but it kind of illustrates something, which is home occupation. And the first line of home occupation has something that says such as, and it lists some things. Will people interpret such as to mean only?
Yes.
When it was meant to just give examples,
illustrative,
and it complicates things, because home occupation is basically, if nobody knows you're there, you could freaking have your business in your house, as long as nobody knows it's there, right? And so I think when that was drawn up, in the help of trying to aid people's understanding, too many words confused it. And so we actually looked at other towns with home occupation, and they don't have those words, because it's just, here's it, and, have a nice day. And we complicated it
Yep.
with the word such as, well, it's not that, so I can't approve it, and this and that. And so there may be some verbosity in our
Yep.
regulations that may be best, like, you didn't have to say all that.
Yep. And I think that's an excellent example too, Peter, because I think what's going on these days is after 2020 now, the concept of what is a home-based work environment has changed dramatically.
Correct.
And so the question is, do our regs reflect what the reality is in the world today? Because there can be circumstances, perhaps, and I haven't looked at your regs in detail, that somebody working out of their house because their employer shut down the office environment due to COVID could be a violation of the zoning regs. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, let's try to avoid those types of things.
Great.
And at least be aware of the current reality and draw lines where they make sense in that situation. Yeah.
The home occupation is 2-08H if you want to take note of it.
Thank you.
By memory or?
It's like, right, yeah, it's long.
I know you guys are gonna have to
The,
recalibrate based on the new
command
numbering
actually
system,
worked
right?
You see what I mean, though, right? The example, do you have it up? You see what it's like? There's like a list of stuff there.
yeah.
It's like, why'd you have a list of stuff?
Is that the one
uses. Is it
Right.
impedes just in general? So
Yeah.
I think, was that the one we were joking about? It had millinery and dressmaking in it? Yeah, so which is,
Yeah.
I don't.
Like, for God's sake.
I know when you see regulations that say abattoirs are not permitted, it's like, okay, really? That's from
Egg
like
soil.
1930s, 1940s,
Yeah.
right? Okay, we can do some good there. So,
Right,
yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Great. Does anybody have anything else? I think we're looking forward to just over here. Great.
Yeah, before it gets too late, I think it's important to hit on 21, 29, because those are
Okay.
required. So I just want to make sure that they're on board with those changes.
Well, I think, so there's two ways to go here. Number one is Karen gave me the regulations as they exist today, and that's what I'm going to take and run with. If the commission says on parking regulations, did you opt out on parking?
Yes.
Is that embodied in what Karen gave me? Or you opted out?
We opted out.
Okay,
Yes,
so
we
the
opted-
regulations which you have, there's no change. Same thing on accessory dwelling units.
Yes.
Right.
You opted out but didn't adopt new standards.
Right.
That's not, so no changes will occur there either.
Right.
During our discussions on regulations moving forward, I may add some sidebar notes of things to observations. We can talk about those and the commission can decide to take those up in the future. But my main intention right now is to get what you've got into a user-friendly configuration and format and a good foundation for the future in terms of other tweaks or changes we may want to make.
Right, yeah, I was more referring to page 1 of your modifying zoning purposes.
Yes.
I like the updating the regulatory statutes, the historical tribal pieces, like all of that is going to go ahead and be updated anyway, right?
I think what I would likely do is point that out as an observation in the margin, but I think that the chair's observation earlier is give us something that we could go with, which is a reflection of our current regulations. I'll point these things out. But I'm not anticipating bringing back major red lines. If, when the committee gets a chance to look through it and talk it through and say, look, maybe we should. I mean, there's a little known piece in Public Act 2129 says the regulation shall not prohibit what's called a cottage food operation. Cottage food operation is a simplified situation where anybody in their kitchen can actually make food for sale under a license from the state. Then you can sell it, online and all the other stuff. So the regulations can't prohibit that.
Right.
Do our regs need to point that out and add that as an accessory use, or in fact, does the state statute override? So these are some of the things we'll come back with. We'll come back and say, look, here's the clean reorganization. We've got a solid foundation to put the rest of our superstructure on. Let's go.
So let me, because I just want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding here. There is no intention of this commission to revisit the accessory dwelling units or the parking opt-outs that we did last October. So any commentary to those two items, I'm not interested in seeing.
Okay.
Likewise, with regards to recreational marijuana, we took action on that. We prohibit recreational marijuana from either being sold or cultivated in our town. And we actually, I think, adopted a regulation to that effect. I'm not interested in going down that trail again. We did it 6 months ago.
Yep. Wrote it down.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mary Ellen, anything else? You good? Jim? You good? Peter,
Yeah.
bring it home.
So I think you got a flavor for what we're looking for.
Yep.
And I think in the spirit of not just making things good for us, but making things good for the public is kind of the spirit and intent of what we're looking for in clearer. And I think you said it about looking for inconsistencies of words, numbers, that kind of thing. Like it says 30 here, but this is 15. Like, did you meant to do that?
Yep.
That kind of thing is the type of stuff we were looking for that would take us 10 years to go do. That's like a great help for us.
No, and I think that having read regulations for years, a lot of these things become clearer when you reorganize the regs and bring things together. It's like,
Right.
wait a second, there's situations that get created, I call regulatory purgatory, which is one side says you can't do this and the other side says you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, ooh, what
Now
is
what?
somebody supposed to do?
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Yeah. And we should say, that this is kind of historic for us because we're changing how this is going to look for a long time. And so we should not, take that lightly because we've had this book, this piece of paper for decades. And that's how it was. And only recently did we get it on a computer, but not in a way that we're all kind of used to. And so by us changing that, this is kind of legacy type stuff. So, I think we all take it seriously but it's an exciting time and it's the betterment of things that we're doing for the town. And so I think this is a great thing. And thanks to Mary Ellen and staff for finding it, and to our town manager who snuck in for giving us the, allowing to have the funding for us and all that. And so Glenn, I thank you for doing this, and look forward to moving forward. And like I said, it's the next step. It's not the final step in regulations.
Right.
This is a process that will continue on or whatever. So we're not done at this. This is just a phase of it.
Right.
And it should be looked upon that way, that we have many I don't say decades.
Decades.
We have a long way to go before we get everything or changes or whatever, but this is a great first step for all of us.
I'll coordinate with Mary Ellen in terms of your schedule, in
Yep.
terms of getting together with the committee and then coming back to the commission. Set of regs is big enough that it's not going to appear, you may get it 2 weeks or more before a meeting, just so that you can start to get familiar with it rather than having to react to it quickly. So I'll
Yeah.
coordinate. Perfect.
Yeah, I think if you could work from Peter as a point in contact, as you and I had discussed, I would appreciate that.
Yep.
And I want to take a moment just to recognize Commissioner Santago's tenacity and see-through-itness, if you will, on this issue. It's something that him and I talked about, I think, almost 4 years ago when he was first elected as a full member to this commission. And I'm happy to see that he's moving the ball forward, and I look forward to the outcome here. And I'm sure it will be something that will be beneficial to everybody in town, as well as those people who do business with town. Providing clarity to our folks who are trying to open businesses here is something that I am always striving to do. And I think Peter hit it on the head when he said that, just because we've been doing it this way doesn't mean it's the right way, doesn't mean it's the wrong way, but it certainly is worth looking at to see if there's a better way. And I look forward to hearing from the commission and from you, Glenn, on the outcome on this. So with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting here.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Got a motion? We have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. 9 minutes.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Glenn.
What's that? What's up? What don't you appreciate? You. Oh, okay.
So, do you really do something like this?
Yeah, because my operations is really my
Who you
job,
got?
but I'm the process improvement person. So we went from having this
Yeah,
also
as long as it's,
to
as you
decision
know.
trees. So instead of, no, I'm sorry, not decision trees, to process flows. So at least you could hyperlink what
Yeah.
document you needed from a process flow. But people still have decision paralysis from looking at a process flow. So I want our company to now buy decision
Commissioner Volpe, Commissioner Cock, Commissioner Wolowski, alternate Commissioner Caird,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Coviello,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Coles,
Present.
alternate Commissioner Ma,
Here.
Commissioner Santiago,
Here.
Vice Chair Salka, Chair Hammersley.
Chair Hammersley is here, so let's go through this a little bit. Commissioner Tedesco had to go out and take care of some personal thing. He should be back within minutes. Commissioner Salka advised me that he's not going to be here, so I'll see Commissioner Coviello in his place. Commissioner Clark advised me that she would not be here, so I'll see Commissioner Ma in her place. Commissioner Volpe advised me that she would not be here. I'll see Commissioner Coles in her place. And Commissioner Wolowski will not be here, so I'll see Commissioner Caird in his place. Heard,
place, right.
sorry. And with that, I believe we have a quorum. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. The Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we can all remain standing for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting on April 19th,
So moved.
2002. We got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to item number 70, any subcommittee reports?
Just had mine.
Yeah, okay. Let's get into the public hearings. Anna Colbert, home occupation application for a cottage food license in a micro bakery property located at 79 Mancelli Drive in an R40 zone, HO 83.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Colbert, and this is my husband, Sebastian Colbert. So, we are applying here for the little cottage bakery in my house. So everything's gonna be made in my kitchen. So it's cottage bakery. It's a small, it's not mini, it's not almost like micro bakery. So I can make like a big amount of bread. And what else?
Yeah, so I just wanted to cover a couple of things, like some of the abetting neighbors, they weren't really sure what cottage food operation is. So I wanted to quickly go through it. I'm sure most of you probably know it already, but just for, I guess, the record. So cottage food operation is created for people who have a passion for baking or making tasty products and want to share them with others like my wife does. For her, it's really her dream to share that. There are many restrictions for cottage food operation. Food can only be non-perishable. There are limits how much you can sell. Sanitary guidelines are imposed. Sales can only occur at farmers market and directly to customers. So there's no retail sales allowed. So this can be a hobby or it's a great way to see if people like your products, which may lead to opening a bakery, which, you know, hopefully maybe. So like my wife said, this is going to be a micro bakery. So it's not small, it's not mini, it's really one notch above home. So that could mean maybe 15 breads a day, baked 2 to 3 times a week. So bread making certainly takes a lot of time and space, so it's very hard to scale. And at home, it would quickly reach the capacity limit. So we were planning for 2 days at the farmer's market. And then 1 day would be like a delivery day, if it works out, depending who wants to buy, where they live type of thing. During that 1 day delivery day, we are guessing that maybe 5 breads or less potentially could be picked up from our home during an 8-hour window. In case the delivery doesn't work out, they cannot make it and they would like to still pick it up. I know traffic is always a concern. So, you know, our home is certainly not the primary center for picking up the bread. That's not what we want to do. In fact, you know, we rather not have too many strangers coming to our home. So we're going to minimize that as much as we can. But even with in terms of traffic, 5 or less breaths, I mean, could be none, on that given day. It's certainly less than any delivery for any trucks or lawn service, driving in a neighborhood, or friends and family visiting neighbors. So I really think that traffic will basically be unnoticeable to the neighbors. So I just think that traffic would not be a non-issue.
Okay. Is that it?
Yes, that's
Okay. Any questions for members of the commission to the applicant? Seeing none? Oh, Commissioner Coles, go ahead.
To our usual. So you don't plan on putting any signs outside of the house or anything like that? Okay. And then as far as storage for extra flour or anything like that, it's pretty much going to be small quantities. You're not going to have any extra exterior storage or anything like that?
Yeah, no, we don't have we don't have a garage. There's no outbuildings.
Gotcha. All right. So, I mean, those are the questions that might affect your neighbors that they might be concerned with. So I really hope this works out. And, I hope that it can be parlayed into a bakery on a retail level. That would be great. So good luck to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All set, Gail?
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for members of the commission? All right. So at this point, what we do is we're going to open it up to the public to see if there's anyone who wants to testify either for or against the application, and then we'll end up closing the public hearing and moving into the business section where we'll vote on that application likely tonight. Okay?
Thank you.
So if you could just take a seat. At this time, we'll entertain anyone who'd like to speak on this application. Please come to the podium, identify yourself, give us your address. Going twice. Seeing none. Any reason to keep this open? Anyone? No. We'll close the public hearing on that. Moving on to item number 9. 9A, Anna Colbert. Colbert. I'd say it with the French.
Colbert.
Yeah. Sounds better to me, but it's your last name. Home occupation application for a cottage food license in a micro bakery property located at 79 Mansally Drive in an R40 zone, HO 83. Is there any discussion on this? Commissioner Santago.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve HO number 83.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We'll give that Commissioner Tedesco. Any further discussion on this? Mary Ellen, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Tedesco,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Caird,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Coviello,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Ma,
Yes.
Commissioner Santiago,
Yes.
Chair Hammersley.
Members of the yes, motion passes 7-0. Congratulations.
See how easy?
Item
Good luck.
number 9B and 9C, I'm looking for a table on those two items. We're still waiting wetlands of action on those two items. Can I get a motion to table those two?
I move we table FF number 271 and SPR 1837.
We have a motion with a second. Mr. Tedesco with a second. Yep.
Make sure that's 36, 37, 38.
Yeah,
Oh.
there's three here. Just for clarification, it's.
Just as
it's both
36, 37. There's a 38? Okay. So I'll amend my motion that we
Okay.
table.
Nick, you good with that amendment?
I do.
Okay.
Scrivener error.
Pat, you have something?
No, just making sure.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to item 9D, mandatory 824 referral of an ordinance appropriating $6,920,000 for costs related to Southington High School roof project and authorizing an issue of $6,920,000 bonds and notes to finance the appropriation. The amount of such bonds and notes to be reduced by the amount of project grants received, MR 565. Mark Shoda, Town Manager.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Mark Shota, 75 Main Street. This is a mandatory 824. The town council is asking you to review this under that statute. It hopes that using the 824 process, we move to the next level, which is a public hearing in front of the Board of Finance, and then finally a public hearing in front of the town council, and then hopefully send it to the voters in November where they can vote on it. This is to complete the roof at Scientin High School. Some of you may remember we came to an 824 probably 5 or 6 years ago to do partial roof. This is for the completion of that. It's going to be the roof, and also the goal is to put some solar panels on the top of it. So the superintendent is here to answer any questions you have specifically, but the statutory reasons why I'm here.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions for members of the commission?
Yeah.
Commissioner Satago.
Just for we've been fixing this roof since I was there. I mean, there's been water coming down that thing I've been out for like 40 years. We gonna fix it this time?
Well, as I mentioned before, we did it, the first process was about $2.2 million, which I
Honest
believe
to
was
God.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
We went to referendum 6 years ago and fixed it 5 years ago. This is the second part of that.
Yeah.
And you can see the cost of that,
Yeah.
which is the larger part of it. So to answer your question, yes, if assuming the voters wish to approve it in November, we plan on fixing the roof.
Yeah, because I mean, man, oh man, I remember water coming into the library. I mean, it was interesting.
It's been a while since went to.
It has been a while since I've been there. That I was in the library should of note. But the process, Mark,
Yep.
is because you gave us a process slide here: phase 1, phase 2, phase.
That's for the second.
That's
for
the next
second
one. So
yep.
this is for
Just for the roof at the high school with the solar panels.
So this is just the roof, and then we're going to talk about the process.
There's going to be
Talk
two
about the next-
questions.
yeah.
Gotcha.
The council's going to propose two questions, and assuming we finish with this one, I'll be up in a second.
Got it.
On the second part, and the superintendent will handle the tough part of that one.
Got it. Thank
Also
you.
at the roof.
Yeah, yes.
Any other questions for members of Commissioner Coles?
Just a couple general questions. The solar panels that are going to be put up on the roof, about how much energy is that going to provide? Is that going to be able to satisfy the needs of the school?
I don't know if it would exclusively satisfy the needs of the school, but I mean, the goal is obviously to reduce the energy consumption that we're relying on right now.
Is it going to be a rolled roof?
Yes.
Good. Those are my questions. Cool. Thank you.
All right, Ken.
And I think one other area of the roof that we had addressed where there was water was the atrium, which was not part of the first roof project, but that's been addressed as well at this point.
Okay.
Steve, could you just identify yourself so we get it on?
I'm
the
sorry,
record?
yeah, Steve Adansi, Superintendent of Schools.
Okay. Any other questions for members of the commission? Seeing none, can we get a roll call called on this? Or, yeah, we have a motion, we have a second, can we get a roll call? Oh, we don't have a motion on this, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we have a favorable 824 referral back to the town council for MR number 565.
Okay, do we have a second on that?
Second.
Commissioner Coles with a second. Can we get a roll call on this, please?
Commissioner Tedesco,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Caird,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Coviello,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
alternate Commissioner Ma,
Yes.
Commissioner Santego,
Yes.
Chair Hammerson.
Hammers is a yes, motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item 9E, mandatory 824 referral for ordinance appropriating $16,945,000 for costs related to a Southington High School athletic fields project and authorizing the issuance of a $16,945,000 bond and notes to finance the appropriation MR 566.
Good evening,
Mark
Mr.
Schoda.
Chairman.
Yep.
Mark Schoda, 75 Main Street. Once again, this is the wish of the town council to move forward under the statutory H-824. Once they get a recommendation back from you, the hope is to have a public hearing at the Board of Finance level and then at the town council level, and assuming everything goes well, to send it to the voters in November. This is for the repairing of and actual redesign of the fields at Scientin High School. And last time Peter was on the fields, they look exactly the same the last time you were on the, so therefore we're looking to update
Remember
those.
me there?
Yeah, so in this particular case, we've all toured that. I'm sure all of you have been there. The fields are not in the best shape. We have tennis courts that can't be played on. We have softball fields and baseball fields that if it rains a little bit, they can't be played on for days. So this is time for an upgrade. The town council and the Board of Education fully support this, and hopefully this board does too. The superintendent will ask any specific questions that you have.
Okay, so let me just start off and just, acknowledge and recognize that these fields aren't just used by students at Southington High School or during their competitions. They're also used for a variety of different activities, not the least of which is the lacrosse weekends that they have, I think for men and girls during the spring. But there's other activities that go on. I know there's a tennis camp that goes on there in the summer. But there's other activities that occur at those fields as well. My question, and I think I know the answer to this, is there going to be prioritization given to sports that are primarily played by females? For example, the softball field, which I know is in phase 1 of the project here. I just want to make sure that those are prioritized on this list.
I'm going to let the superintendent and the AD answer those questions, but you've already started reading the chart that was given to you today. So my understanding is that is the case, but I'll let them answer that question. And to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, yes, the town personnel as well as the students at the high school do use those fields. It's anticipated we might be able to put a second turf field there. And I could tell you that the Director of Recreation of the town of Scientin is fully in support of this. And we're hoping that, obviously working very closely with the AD, it's not just for the benefit of the students at the high school, which of course it is, but it's also the benefit for all the children and adults for the town who use that facility.
Yeah, as Steve comes up to the mic, I'll make sure that I don't fail to recognize that the Pop Warner, or whatever they call it these days, the football gets played out there regularly during the fall months. On Sundays, I think they're out there pretty much all day. So, but Steve Medancy, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. Steve Medancy, Superintendent of Schools. So what you have before you is a project chart that talks about the phasing of the project specifically. So it's the longer one here. It's a simplified Gantt chart of sorts. And as you will see, the major objective of phase one is to address the female softball, JV, and varsity fields, as well as the tennis courts. We have major cracking and heaving and movement of the subsurface there. The track and field is, we're running on the far side of the track for sprint events because the main straightaway is worn. And the lacrosse and hockey field, the reason why that's in there is because it is very much like a puzzle. And so once you address the softball field, the lacrosse field and field hockey field is directly abuts it. And so when you move the fence, you're going to be moving that field as well. It's more of a shift over, but which would create more space for a tennis court because some of the court space there, they don't have regulation end zones, if you will. I'm using the term end zones, baselines. For regulation play in certain matches. And so, additionally, the seating for the tennis courts is an area that can be addressed, especially relative to handicap accessibility. So we see that whole side along the main road there as the site that would be impacted first. We've tried to phase it in so that the next portion of the project is where there would be open access to that portion of the athletic complex after those seasons are over, so that with little disruption. And if need be, as we did a couple years back, we could use a neighboring town's football field if we had to. Cheshire High School was kind enough a few years back to allow us to use their home venue during the construction phase of the project. And then last field, as you'll see, is the back and lower portion of the athletic complex, which would have easy access because the major portion of the complex will have been addressed. What I provided to you tonight is not something I need to go through, at length, but it does, the master plan that we have is a dense document with a lot of verbiage and graphs and charts and all that. And so we just tried to create a simplified document for you folks just to be able to see some of the major highlights and points of emphasis around this project.
Okay, I appreciate that. Sure. Tennis courts, let me just sort of throw this out there. Those weren't done that long ago, if I can remember. I want to say maybe 10 years ago. And I almost, because I walk there regularly, right? So I almost immediately, I almost immediately recognized the cracking that was occurring there. And I'm not sure if it was a result of going to the lowest bidder, but I would encourage that when that time comes, that you don't look to the lowest bidder, because typically when you do that, from my experience, having played in that sandbox for a decade and a half, you end up regretting it at the end of the day. And again, I don't know if that happened there, but this is just an example. If it was, that's what you end up with, and it becomes frustrating.
Yep.
I'm sure for the people that play on those courts. But with that, if there are any other questions for members of the commission, Commissioner Santago.
What's the life cycle of synthetic turf? That's A.
Yep.
Because we're going to at some point come back again. And, since we put this in back when Coach Fontana was promoting it, there's been advances in turf.
Yes.
So I guess twofold question: what's the life cycle, and when are we going to have to revisit this again?
Sure.
Versus grass.
Yeah.
And are you putting in a different type surface? That's because we always hear about injury. We always hear about, pluses and minuses to synthetic. So can you kind of address some of those?
Sure. The turf field that's there right now, the shelf life was 10 years, and we're on year 8 of that field. But I think the foresight of the Board of Education and the town at the time of the installation was collecting fees relative to youth league registrations, gate receipts, and whatnot. And so the main field, a substantial portion of that will be subsidized by those fees that have been generated over the years. And so similar type of approach will be that if we have double the use and there are rental costs associated with the use of those fields, gate receipts, tickets, things like that, will go towards turf replacement down the road.
Okay. And what about the surface itself? You're putting in a different type surface, or what?
I would say whatever, and I don't want to necessarily speak too much to this, because the athletic director is probably more versed in mine, but I would imagine we would not be going with the same exact type of system per se. The subsurface probably wouldn't be changed all that much for drainage.
I mean, I see kids come off of that field and their clothes are black from the rubber stuff coming off.
Yeah, industry standard has certainly evolved, and I'll let the athletic director speak to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Excellent questions. If I could just answer the tennis court
Just
question.
identify yourself.
Of Steve Risser.
Okay.
Director of Athletics, 111 Royal Oak Drive.
All right. Go ahead.
I would like to briefly address the tennis courts if I could.
Sure.
The materials that many tennis courts were constructed with were asphalt in the past, to the what you've talked about with the cracking in New England. The industry standard is now to use post-tension concrete base, and that's what we would anticipate using for that. So I just thought I would address that, Chairman.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
I just don't want to see the cracks appear 2 years after we put it
Exactly. And I
down.
believe the year was 2004. I believe Mr. Schoda mentioned the year
Time
that
flies. I
the
thought it
Ag
was
Science
10 years ago, so-
came in. But getting to the, if I may, on behalf of the superintendent, to talk about the turf field, as you mentioned, Mr. Santiago. The newest versions of them that are coming out, and by the way, exhaustively, we have the ones that have the rubberized material in them. They have been exhaustively researched to be safe across the country. There have been many challenges to them, but it's held up as being a safe surface. So that's the surface, and it's held up very well. Matter of fact, as you can see, the replacement of the turf field in this plan is in phase 2, and we think we can wait for phase 2 because our field's in really good shape after 8 years. But the length of this field was, as the superintendent mentioned, 10 to 12 years.
Right.
The newest fields now coming out, you could put one down and be good for 15 years. That's what they're expecting.
Okay.
So we would hope to get that particular length out of the next one. And remember, the replacement costs are not as much as putting in the brand new second field that we're talking about here, which may be addressed in a minute. But I think at this point, still the majority of them use the rubber base, and it's been found to be safe. So I'm not saying that we will go with that, but we'll be working with a company that will make recommendations to us.
And so what determined your phasing? Was it the condition of the current things? Did that determine your phasing?
Well, as the superintendent mentioned, it was really our priorities right now for safety are the tennis courts, the track that surrounds the turf field, which is in much worse condition. The original one is still there. It's been resurfaced a couple times, but we're down to the asphalt in the main straightaway. So I think we prioritized that, starting with softball, as Mr. Medancy mentioned. If you look at Pleasant Street, it goes softball, goes all the way down to the tennis courts. And then we included in that first phase the track because it needs to be done. So we sort of prioritized, I think, the most urgent needs along with addressing the softball situation, which has been something that came to our attention a few years ago.
So if the impetus is indeed safety versus we want a shiny new thing, I think that's going to be contingent upon, because this is going to go to referendum, right?
Yes, sir.
So $60 million, a lot of money. And so when you go forth with that, I think that needs to make sure the public understands that in detail. And I think, you hate to say marketing plan, but, when you want people to spend their tax money towards something, they want to be sure that it's spent on something that's good and not just something that's nice to have. And so in regards to safety and awareness and, well, if you don't do it now, you're going to have to spend more later. And, certainly safety of children is paramount always.
We always say safety first. Yes,
Right?
sir.
But I think if that's the reason for asking for this, as well as the phase plan, I think that's important, because I think there's still, to this day, people asking questions, why do we have a synthetic fields versus grass. So I hear that all the time. And so if we're going to, again, do that, then I think it's contingent upon yourself, the superintendent, and council to say, here's why people should spend their tax money on something.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think getting support in the community for the project for those reasons. I mean, safety is always going to be our first priority. We with our coaches every day, and I think some of the short-term safety issues we've been addressing at the complex this summer are addressing that as well.
Yep.
So, but yes, sir, the idea of getting community support for why we're doing it, it's not just putting out nice fields. It's really constructing them safely so we can perform on them. And again, to the point made earlier, outside of that initial turf field, there really hasn't been any significant improvements made since the high school was opened.
No, they're all the fields I used to play on.
I
so,
know.
good.
I coach youth girls lacrosse, and the fields in town, they're not great. And we played on the backfield, the soccer field, on Friday, and it was like a pleasure. But that even isn't that. I mean, the kids fall down because they're not like very level. But it was a huge improvement from playing at Darnowski, where there's rocks in the middle of the field. So when our girls get to play on the turf at the high school, it's a huge treat, and it's very safe, and they don't fall down.
Right. And it's not only the advantage of safety. I mean, actually, there's a maintenance saving on having turf fields too, because you don't line them every week. You don't have to maintain them. You have to cut the grass. There's various advantages. We could provide a list of advantages to having a turf field. So.
And I think, again, to Tessa's point, which is great testimony, will be contingent upon, asking the taxpayers to support it with their dollars. It's up to them if they want to spend it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or Commissioner Coles?
Hi, I have two questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first one is, I think we kind of mentioned it a little bit in the beginning about gate fees and things like that. Is there any thought to, now that we're going to have, if this passes, the opportunity to lease out the space to bring in more revenue for other outside organizations? We mentioned some of the clubs that do already use these spaces, but if it's there and we have the opportunity, and maybe we can bring some more revenue in to help offset some of these costs, is that part of the plan?
Yes, I mean, that's ongoing now, even now with our first turf field, and certainly with the second one, that will help in that regard. I mean, we've had various different groups. Mr. LaPre deals with it along in conjunction with us in scheduling the field, the recreation director. So we have a group coming in playing some semi-pro football this summer, already on the existing turf field. We have outside groups that come in. We have a town group playing soccer Sunday mornings from 8 to 10. They lease the field. So, if we're doing the first, obviously the youth and the high school schedules at first, but when there's availability to schedule, especially in the summer, that's ongoing. So we would continue that philosophy. I've talked to Mr. LaPre about that. I don't think there'd be any change in that. We're going to continue doing that. And those fees go into the maintenance account that Mr. Medancy was talking about.
Okay.
Because every year we have to groom and we have to clean, we have to clean and groom the field each summer. So to keep it under warranty,
So my next question is, it's more of a Hail Mary pass, I guess. But everybody that's ever driven past there when there's a softball game or an event, the traffic there is atrocious and the parking there is dangerous. Is there any possibility that we can squeeze a little bit more space out of that street and realign the sidewalk so that we could have some back-in parking or some other arrangement so that
it's interesting you say that, because you've been to the high school many times. It is a challenge, but thanks to Mr. Shota and the town last year, we expanded the parking lot in the front of the building at the high school. We encourage all of our students every day, and we have them park in the front of the school and the athletes to walk 100 yards around. We frequently remind them that that's what we need to do. Parking is limited in the back of the school. You're correct. Matter of fact, at the softball game today, that is an issue that's ongoing. But the fact that we have extra spaces in the front, I think we have to just keep reinforcing that there's plenty of room to park in the front of the high school and just walk 100 yards around the building and get there. It may not be a perfect solution, but I don't see any we're so, if you look at the map in that proposal there, we're so jammed with our fields. The good news is we don't go off campus except for the sports that we have to, like swimming, boys swimming and diving at the Y, and hockey, a hockey rink, and and there's one other, gymnastics. Thank you very much, Mr. Medancy. But everything else is at the high school, and not many high schools can accommodate everything on campus. So, so that's a challenging one. I actually anticipated a question on parking. So
Glad I asked
it's a good question.
Thank you.
Pleasant Street
Do
is
what I'm
a
doing.
challenge.
Any other questions or comments from members of the commission? Seeing none, anything else to add? Anyone? Okay. Mary Ellen, or can we get a motion on this?
I'll move that we send back a favorable 824 referral for MR 566.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Mary Ellen, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Tedesco?
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Caird?
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Coviello?
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Coles?
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Ma?
Yes.
Commissioner Santiago?
Yes.
Chair Hammersley?
Hammersley's a yes. Motion passes. Congratulations. Nice job. Yep. Moving on to item 9F, request for a second and final 90-day extension to file Mylar, property located at 136 Curtis Street, S1330. Who am I turning to on this one?
Yeah, I could take it.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
I'm looking around. I don't
This is
see it.
the industrial subdivision. The applicant came and has some issues on financing, so we're not sure if they're gonna drop out and somebody take it from there, but at this point, they've requested an extension, so.
Okay. Discussions are still going on then.
Yeah.
So there's still hope.
So we're hoping that it would go through.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too. We all know that that piece of property is something that I would like to get taken care of. So is there any discussions or questions for members of the commission?
So you're in favor of this, Jim?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Can we get a motion on this?
I'd like to move that we approve S 1330, granting a 90-day extension to file Mylar for the property located at 136 Curtis Street.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? We could do a voice vote on this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Moving on to item 10, administrative items. We talked about this, I think, at the last one, and there was an email that went out. There's an FOI session. You all could read the details on that, so I'm not going to do it for you. And then on to item, anything else to add underneath there, Mary Ellen? I will add that at our next meeting date on May 17th, we have a special meeting preceding our regular meeting, and at that meeting, we will be hearing our final version of the affordable housing plan, and then voting on that subsequently to get that filed as well. So that's another thing that's on the future agendas.
Yeah, I don't think we were gonna do a 6 o'clock. I think we were just gonna schedule a public hearing at your regular meeting.
Okay, so
Oh,
we're-
great.
okay,
Oh,
okay,
beautiful.
That's great.
Kind of
Okay.
on, but it
No, that's fine.
Great.
About 17th?
It's the 17th, yep.
Okay.
2 weeks from tonight. We have a couple items underneath item number 11, applications that have been received. You want to talk about those at all, Mary Ellen, or not really?
let's see.
They seem to be pretty, well,
Yeah, one's just a one lot re-subdivision. The other one is a new boutique hotel off of West Street, or it's West Street and, what is it, Meriden Waterbury, Jim?
no, it's West Main.
Oh,
West.
Corner.
oh, on the corner.
Yeah, so
Oh.
you'll know that corner has been vacant for a number of years, if not
God.
decades.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
And it's just a site plan. So that's an approved thing.
Site plan, yes.
Okay.
And then the other one is a petition for a text change to increase
That's-
lot coverage.
that's a month away. You have that scheduled for June 7th, so,
Yeah,
okay.
because it has to go to, so. wait a minute.
Okay. Any other comments or questions or anything else that any members of the commission would like to say before we move to adjourn? With that, can we get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Can we get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, guys.
There you go.